Hey guys, good morning. Today we are going to discuss 2nd Peter book, Introduction. Author. The author identifies himself as Simon Peter. He uses the first person singular pronoun in a highly personal passage and claims to be an eyewitness of the Transfiguration. He asserts that this is his second letter to the readers and refers to Paul as our dear brother. In short, the letter claims to be Peter's and its character is compatible with that claim. Although 2nd Peter was not as widely known and recognized in the early church as 1st Peter, some may have used and accepted it as authoritative as early as the 2nd century and perhaps even in the latter part of the 1st century. In 1st Clement AD 95 may allude to it. It was not ascribed to Peter until Origen's time, 185 to 253 AD, and he seems to reflect some doubt concerning it. Eusebius in AD 265-340 placed it among the questioned books, though he admits that most accept it as from Peter. After Eusebius' time, it seems to have been quite generally accepted as a canonical. In recent centuries, however, its genuineness has been challenged by a considerable number of interpreters. One of the objections that has been raised is the difference in style from that of 1st Peter. But the difference is not absolute. There are noteworthy similarities in vocabulary and in other matters. In fact, no other known writing is as much like 1st Peter as 2nd Peter. The differences that do exist may be accounted for by variations in subject matter, in the form and purpose of the letters, in the time and circumstances of writing, in sources used or model used, and in scribes who may have been employed. Perhaps most significant is the statement, when you look at 1st Peter chapter 5 verse 12, that Silas assisted in the writing of 1st Peter. No such statement is made concerning 2nd Peter, which may explain its noticeable difference in style. Other objections arise from a secular reconstruction of early Christian history or misunderstandings or misconstructions of the available data. For example, some argue that the reference to Paul's letter in chapter 3 verse 15 to 16 indicates an advanced date for this book, beyond Peter's lifetime. But it is quite possible that Paul's letters were gathered at an early date, since some of them had been in existence and perhaps in circulation for more than 10 years. Example, Thessalonians by as much as 15 years prior to Peter's death. Besides, what Peter says may only indicate that he was acquainted with some of Paul's letter. Communication in the Roman world and in the early church was good, not that there was a formal collection of them. Date. 2nd Peter was written toward end of Peter's life. When you look at chapter 1 verse 12 to 15, after he had written a prior letter, chapter 3 verse 1, to the same readers, probably 1st Peter. Since Peter was martyred during the reign of Nero, his death must have occurred prior to AD 68. So it is very likely that he wrote 2nd Peter between 65 and 68. Some have argued that this date is too early for the writing of 2nd Peter, but nothing in the book requires a later date. The error combated is comparable to the kind of heresy present in the 1st century. To insist that the 2nd chapter was directed against 2nd century Gnosticism is to assume more than the contents of the chapter warrant. While the heretics referred to in 2nd Peter may well have been among the forerunners of 2nd century Gnostics, Nothing is said of them that would not fit into the later years of Peter's life. Some have suggested a later date because they interpret the reference to the fathers in chapter 3 verse 4 to mean an earlier Christian generation. However, the word is most naturally interpreted as the Old Testament patriarchs. When you look at John chapter 6 verse 31, forefathers, Acts chapter 3 verse 13. Similarly, a reference to Paul and his letters does not require a date beyond Peter's lifetime. And 2 Peter and Jude. There are conspicuous similarities between 2 Peter and Jude. When compared 2 Peter 2 with Jude chapter 4 verse 18, but there are also significant differences. It has been suggested that one borrowed from the other or that they both drew on a common source. If there is borrowing, it is not a slavish borrowing but one that adapts to suit the writer's purpose. While many have insisted that Jude used Peter, it is more reasonable to assume that the longer letter, Peter, incorporated much of the shorter Jude. Such borrowing is fairly common in ancient writings. For example, many believe that Paul used parts of early hymns in Philippians chapter 2 verse 6 to 11 and 1 Timothy chapter 3 to 16. We can understand. Purpose. In his first letter, Peter feeds first sheep by instructing them how to deal with persecution from outside the church. In this second letter, he teaches them how to deal with false teachers and evildoers who have come into the church. While the particular situations naturally call for variations in content and emphasis, in both letters, Peter, as a pastor, shepherd of Christ's sheep, seeks to commend to his readers a wholesome combination of Christian faith and practice. More specifically, his purpose is threefold. The first one is to stimulate Christian growth, and second one is to combat false teaching, and the third one is to encourage watchfulness in view of the Lord's certain return. In this book, we can see total 3 chapters outline. The first chapter we can see greetings, exhortations to growth in Christian virtues, the divine enablement, the call for growth and the value of such growth, the purpose and authentications of Peter's message, his aim in writing, the basis of his authority. In chapter 2 we can see warning against false teachers, their coming predicted, their judgment assured, their characteristics set forth. In third chapter we can see the fact of Christ's return, Peter's purpose in writing restarted, the coming of scoffers. So these 3 chapters and the certainty of Christ's return and exhortation based on the fact of Christ's return, conclusion and doxology. So these 3 chapters we are going to discuss chapter by chapter in our regular Bible study. God bless you. Thanks.